Okay, let's start part 3 of lecture 16. So far, sexual economics theory is not faring well when we put it to direct tests. But Roy Baumeister argued that it would be hard to find evidence supporting it because the theory is so dark and unromantic. Yes, it is. It never considers that most people have sex because they like each other and are mutually attracted. Decades of close relationships research have shown that that's the primary reason why both genders get into bed with each other. So what did Roy say about this? Perhaps the most interesting question is why, he says, if SET is correct, people are reluctant to acknowledge the exchange process overtly. To acknowledge that would reveal the man and woman as having an essentially antagonistic relationship at precisely the moment when they are presumably trying to form a united partnership. Rather than trying to negotiate a transaction before you decide to sleep with someone, most people, they trust and love someone enough that they decide they want to get naked with them and be intimate. Not according to sexual economics theory, but because it is a dark theory, he said, you really can't test it using self-reports. And he's right. Our participants rejected the idea that here's just one item we used in our sexual exchange as a motive for discouraging women from having casual sex scale. Women are sexually discouraged so as not to cheapen sex for all women, making it harder for women to persuade men to give them resources, for example, financial support and commitment to the relationship, in exchange for sex. It's a long-winded item, but we use direct quotes from Baumeister and Twang's paper because we wanted everyone to understand that we were actually testing the tenets of the theory rather than translating them into something that Baumeister and Twang might say, hey, you didn't really test our ideas. Yes, we did. And participants stiff-armed sexual economics or sexual exchange as a reason for discouraging women from having sex. But maybe Roy is right. Maybe you can't ask about sexual exchange directly. Therefore, in our next study, we switched to implicit measures of endorsing sexual exchange, and we had a forced choice behavioral task that also reflected endorsing sexual exchange. If the theory is correct, women should score higher than men on these measures because only women want men to have to pay for sex. SET authors state that men support initiatives that lower the price of sex, whereas women want to preserve or raise the market value of their sexual favors. Okay, maybe, but SET portrays men as bribing women for sex and women as selling their bodies to men. In essence, women's chief resource is sex, while men use their financial clout to purchase it. In our view, this makes sexual exchange a vestige of patriarchy, a hangover effect from thousands of years of patriarchy. And what do we know about patriarchy? Men are more invested in it, they support it more than women do. As a result, men should be more supportive of any system that signifies gender inequality, even when it means restricting access to sex or raising the price of sexual relations. In essence, men's desire for power and for having more power than women should be stronger than their desire for free love. And if that's the case, then our results, if this hypothesis is supported, would support male control theory. So for the behavioral choice task, we build it. The cover story was a consumer research project. We brought Rutgers undergraduate participants into the lab, and they were given a forced choice between two different jewelry ads, one of which promoted sexual exchange by putting a price on sex, and the other did not. And they made that choice 13 times. So examples of sexual exchange ads where the Beatles lied, "You can buy love." Of course, there's an investment on your return. Of course, there's a return on your investment. We just can't print it here. 3 days till Christmas. You, wrapped in a bow, won't cut it. And every kiss begins with K. And then on the left-hand side are the controlled jewelry ads. So people had to make a choice between a sexual exchange ad and a control ad 13 times. What did we find? Contrary to SET, men selected more sexual exchange ads than women did. And that gender difference was explained by hostile sexism, suggesting that men support sexual exchange more than women because men resist female empowerment. So again, men are more invested in patriarchy than women are. For our IAT, which we call the sexual exchange IAT, we wanted to measure automatic associations between sex and money or sex and free. So participants categorized pictures representing sex with words that represent money in one block of trials. In another block, they categorized those same pictures with words representing free. So here are some sample pictures that we used to represent sex. And the money words were money, buy, expensive, purchase, and the free words were free, perk, donated, and cheap. Contrary to SET, men outscored women on the sexual exchange IAT. In fact, men significantly associated sex with money more than free. Women, their scores were neutral. So both the IAT and the behavioral test showed that men are more invested in the idea that they can buy sex with money. Men are more invested in sexual exchange than women are. So that's the first meta myth of SET, is that they argue women are more invested in sexual exchange than men. Wrong, it's the reverse. And sexual exchange is why women repress female sexuality more than men. That's wrong too. Men repress female sexuality more than women. So how did SET go wrong? The authors relied on evolutionary psychology to assume that men are biologically driven to chiefly want sex from women, whereas women chiefly want men's resources. And then, as we've talked about, evolutionary psychology's notion of different sexual strategies for men and women completely falls apart when you test it directly. And the other thing Baumeister and Twang rely on are self-reports to assume that men like sex more than women, which is what gives women their bargaining chip. The principle of least interest says that women, because they're less eager for sex than men, can withhold sex from men in order to get a better deal. But if we don't use self-reports, or if we use implicit measures, or if we ask about sexual behavior in ways that dampen down the greater costs that women face, especially the danger gap, then we find no gender differences in enthusiasm for sex. But relying on evolutionary psychology and relying on self-reports got, I would say, Baumeister into Twang going down the wrong road when they were trying to come up with a theory of human mating. So clearly, the authors are viewing women as keen to suppress female sexuality in order to demand better resources from men. But just because some men, as we find in our research, are willing to commodify women's bodies and to pay a price for sex, that doesn't mean that women buy into this idea of sexual exchange as a patriarchal theory. Why would they? Undaunted by a lack of evidence, sexual economics theory has spawned a YouTube video called The Economics of Sex, which, as you'll see, equates the pill with DDT, a horrible chemical, and exhorts women or encourages women to band together to refuse to have extramarital sex. Uh-oh. So I want you to watch the Economics of Sex video before you start part 4 of lecture 16. And to help you do that, I've posted a Windows Media video file on Sakai which you'll find in Lecture 16's folder. But in case you can't run WMV files on your computer, you can also search Economics of Sex within YouTube. It's still there. You can watch it. It lasts 9 minutes and 55 seconds. So as long as you see that time, when you bring it up, you will have the right video. Okay? Well, after you watch that, I'll see you in maybe about 10 minutes.